The version of Suicide Squad that the mainstream rejected was the one that was shown having premium currencies, loot mechanics. Slightly different news video today because something's been on my mind for quite a while in regards to the overall state of the gaming industry, and it's not, you can't go a single day at the minute without another news story about layoffs, or another news story about cancelled projects, or another news story about something that's been delayed or restructured or rethought, or this is actually the in thing and we're going to pivot back into that, we're going to do live service stuff. No, actually, no, live service stuff isn't the thing. We're going to cancel that instead because we're going to go back into, single player games are selling really well, we should probably commission stuff that we're going to do in that direction. But don't forget the multiplayer premium currency, and don't forget the live service stuff, and don't forget the grinds and the loot and everything else. It's ridiculous, and you can't really go, more than, like I said, a couple of days reading about how good 2023 is for gaming without something else rearing its head, popping up and saying, hey, by the way, over 6,000 people have lost their jobs, especially over the last month or so, and that doesn't show any signs of abating. Now, there are many things to get to here. There are specific things to touch on. I still want this to be a news video because it's only across the last sort of 24, 36 hours or so that we had the 1-2 punch of the announcement that GTA 6 is real, which is awesome. I want to get back to talking about that and why people are excited, probably relating to the fact that it was initially a major, single-player story-based set of games in the first place. You had that on one end, and then you also had David Zaslav, the CEO for Warner Brothers, saying that they want to double down on live service stuff, which makes no sense when you've got a Suicide Squad being delayed for a year because it's an overt live service game, and you're delaying that for about a year under the proviso that it needs to be changed and overhauled and rethought. And you're pushing it back a whole year to try and make that thing work, to make it more palatable for the average consumer, because live services ain't it. But then the CEO of the same company is like, no, actually they are it, and that is what we want to do instead. It's ridiculous. And then the thing that broke this morning, which I guess it was overnight in the UK, I found it this morning, is that Sony are now walking back half of their overall plan for live service titles. This came from Jim Ryan, the internet's favorite CEO, Jim Ryan, head of PlayStation. That he announced a couple of years ago that they wanted to have 12 live service games out by the end of 2026. And then they set about showing them off. Foam Stars and Fair Games. Helldivers 2 has apparently got some live service elements in it. You've got Bungie's Marathon, the reimagining of their game from the 90s, which is going to be an extraction shooter. And then, Bungie's going to be this premium live service dev. And we're going to go down that route and make all that stuff work. Again, more stuff to talk about when it comes to Bungie, but Sony are now walking all that stuff back, according to Hiroki Totoki, which is one of the figureheads of Sony now, because Jim Ryan is stepping down next year. The dude that planned this stuff is now like, no, actually, the terrain isn't what I thought it was, and I'm gonna retire. I'm actually gonna be over here now. Hiroki Totoki is out there saying that they hope that they'll be able to get 6 of the 12 games out there, again by 2026. They talk about getting them out there by the end of financial year 2025, which pushes it across into March 2026. I just don't think this is it at all. And I think it's a fascinating talking point as to where Sony are. You think about where they were across the PlayStation 1, the PlayStation 2 era. Yes, they survived so much on third parties. And then the PlayStation 3 era was kind of dogged by the way that we went into that generation in itself, with just how many stumbles they made at E3. They overpriced it. There was way too much hubristic marketing in regards to, or statements made in regards to, you'll work 2 jobs to afford a PS3 and everything else. And then the 360 managed to take off instead, allowing then they got too big for their britches and did all the Kinect stuff towards the end of the 2000s, and pushed for online DRM and the way all this stuff was going to go at the start of the 2010s, opening things back up for Sony to do that legendary, now iconic video about how to trade games on a PS4, as in you just give it to a friend. You don't have to worry about paying for the license or anything like that. I'm getting to the fact that catapulted Sony back into the mainstream conversation in regards to first-party titles, in regards to the console you should go get. And then we had that insane run across the PlayStation 4, the reboot of God of War, Horizon Zero Dawn, Ghost of Tsushima, Days Gone. So many big, monolithic, AAA, single-player focused games that are the PlayStation identity. They still have them for The Last of Us 2. We're getting a Ghost of Tsushima 2, and we just had Horizon Forbidden West and God of War last year. But that overall push into live services, clearly in that context, was never it. And the dude that's pushing that forward, like I said, is now stepping back, is now stepping away from the whole thing, leaving the likes of Hiroki Totoki and the rest of the staff at Sony to just be like, what the living hell are we even doing? Why are we trying to chase the Fortnite dollar when that's not remotely our bread and butter? The reason the PS4 became one of the best-selling consoles of all time was off the back of those single-player games. It was off the back of The Last of Us, and then making The Last of Us's core feel and identity and maturity the wider PlayStation identity. That's why you have the Ghost of Tsushima's, the God of War reboots, etc. It's why you have Atreus, because we had Ellie in the first place. And so that stuff is just so ludicrous to see. I do want them to walk it all back, but how the hell did they get here in the first place? It's just insane. And like I said, you have the Sony side of things walking back their potential live service titles, walking back the idea of steering into this stuff so much. They would have 12 games out in the next 3 years. The flip side to that is what I mentioned before. It's David Zaslav and Warner Brothers doubling down on that stuff. There is a specific quote from Zaslav as he was doing a recent earnings call for Warner Brothers overall in the gaming division overall. And he said they want more always-on gameplay through live services, multi-platform and free-to-play extensions going forward. Which, like I said before, makes zero sense when you just pushed Suicide Squad back to try and refocus it and reframe it for a single-player market or something that isn't the aggressive live service market. Maybe there's a way where that makes sense in that dude's head, but this is also the dude that said that they were under-leveraging the Harry Potter IP. Now, I'm not a Potter fan myself, but I see that stuff all over the place. Didn't they do a whole bunch of Fantastic Beasts movies? Hogwarts Legacy is literally the highest-selling game of the year straight after, The Legend of Zelda. The Harry Potter's out there. Like, if the dude that's in charge of all that stuff can't see that and can't see that Hogwarts Legacy is a single-player game, is one of the best-selling games of the year, if he can't take that on board, what the living are they doing? Because it needs to be said that the version of Suicide Squad that the mainstream rejected was the one that was shown having premium currencies, loot mechanics, like the purple loot and everything else. That screenshot of Captain Boomerang with a big rifle, which just makes no sense whatsoever. The idea of King Shark having to unlock various other loot components, the various business practices that killed the Avengers game. If you would have told any of us 5 years ago that the Avengers game was going to completely bomb and then be removed from sale barely a year after it was put out, none of us would have believed you. The fact that it's gone this sideways and then straight down is so stupid. I want to highlight that stuff, though, because you have these two contrasting mentalities going forward. You have Sony kind of realizing that the live service boom ain't really it, but they still want to push forward for 6 out of 10 or 12 of those live service games overall. And then you have Warner Brothers over here saying, no, everything is live service and everything should be that. And, whatever irons in the fire they potentially have, let's say whatever the hell Rocksteady's going to do after Suicide Squad, maybe another Arkham game or whatever, that will have to have live service elements, that he wants to have more of that stuff overall to leverage as much money out of the IP as possible. That was the thing as well, is that if you then go back to the Sony side, they just lost their veteran producer of 34 years, Connie Booth, one of the people who was instrumental in bringing you the likes of Sly Cooper, Crash Bandicoot, those various early PlayStation titles that made PlayStation what it is. Behind the scenes, and this is only going off David Jaffe's reporting, he's the creator of God of War, but he did a couple of videos over on his own channel about the reality of what happened to Connie Booth, and speaks very, very highly of Booth herself, and says that she's instrumental to the PlayStation identity, to the bringing together of the various single-player teams and first-party studios under that general feel of single-player focused, of story-driven games, the things that have sold really well, like I mentioned before, across the PlayStation 4 era. Connie Booth was apparently let go because she was unable to unite the various single-player story-focused teams under the banner of multiplayer, under the banner of live services. And according to Jaffe's reporting, there were a lot of conversations around what the hell are we making? Why are the people who specialize in single-player story-focused, character-driven stuff being asked to do live service stuff instead? It doesn't make any sense. You can see why Jim Ryan stepped back. Dude said that it's because he's retiring and he's sick of traveling around the world every other month. But I nigh on guarantee that none of this plan is coming together behind the scenes either. Alongside all of this, like I said at the beginning, are just a ludicrous amount of layoffs, just the amount of teams far and wide that are just being let go with little to no mention of what's going to happen. You go to work in the morning, you're fired by midday. There's just very little happening in regards to a base level of humanity when someone's being let go. Even if you've been a veteran of a studio for decades, Bungie have left... I've lost so many key members of staff. Michael Salvatore, one of the most legendary composers responsible for why Halo sounds like Halo, they let go of that guy. Just what the living hell are you doing? But like I said, at the beginning, you have over 6,000 people have now lost their jobs across the last few months, and it's not specific to the games industry either. There's obviously a much wider conversation to be had about the state of the economies in the Western world in particular, or at least that's the one that we get the most coverage of. The inflation across the board, the fact that we are struggling to afford the amount of games that are available across this year. But if we're talking specifically about the games industry, you do have more than 6,000 people being let go. And if you then bring that lens in smaller and start looking at the likes of Sony, they have let go people from Naughty Dog. They lost a whole bunch of contractors that were working on the Last of Us Factions multiplayer, which is tied into all the Bungie stuff, because Bungie have also let people go. Like I said, Salvatore's been let go and various other veterans of Bungie as well. However, underneath all that was the fact that Bungie missed their revenue target by almost 50%, which is a ludicrous statistic in regards to a studio that is supposed to know exactly what they're doing. Various news stories have appeared over the years about the way that Bungie's been run, and a lot of that was pinned on Activision when they used to work underneath Activision on Destiny. However, in the recent years, it seems more like it's Bungie's management that's at fault, and various people who made Halo what it is are now over at 343 Industries. They're actually working on Halo Infinite, or they've managed to move on to something else. Point being, though, that Sony bought Bungie to be an internal studio that would be able to review the various live service titles that they have going forward. It was apparently because of Bungie that the Last of Us Factions multiplayer game is on ice right now, or isn't getting as much funding and attention, etc. in it, alongside all the stuff that happened with Connie Booth and the internal story teams. It was Bungie's internal review of that game that led to it all just kind of being put to the side for a bit. However, like I said, that expert team are the ones missing their revenue targets by almost 50%, and the ones letting go of their most veteran staff. Like, none of the stuff on the Sony side makes any sense if you focus that lens in a bit. Like I said, it's a wider issue. It's a much wider issue in regards to job stability overall, but it is worth mentioning that if we're talking about the Sony side, the first-party side, the market leader side alongside Nintendo, there are some huge issues here that just point to the fact that everything is kind of on fire for the first party. And that's without mentioning all the Game Pass stuff, the acquisitions, the state of Modern Warfare 3 on the Xbox side, and the fact that Phil Spencer himself is saying that he doesn't expect Game Pass revenue to grow in regards to the portion, the percentage that it makes up their bottom line. He just expects the overall amount of money made to get bigger, but the amount of people who have Game Pass, he doesn't think that percentage number is actually going to change, which is a fascinating way to think about, how much Game Pass means to the Xbox future. That's a whole other thing. And you've just got Nintendo doing their own thing, putting all their money into theme parks and museums and making more Marios and a live-action Zelda, which is not really the version of Zelda that any of us asked for, but, whatever. Speaking of layoffs, the most recent news story to hit online as we were going to bed last night in the UK was that Free Radical are now on the chopping block, and they are owned by Embracer Group. They were one of the many studios brought together during the whole Embracer Group the embracing across the last few years. The idea being that you would get Free Radical back as legendary developers of Time Splitters, and before that, GoldenEye, alongside Rare, the various members of people who made GoldenEye that worked at Rare, went across, made Free Radical, they made Time Splitters. It was another iconic, incredible, phenomenal multiplayer game, that ironically might have worked as a live service thing if you did it well enough. I have no idea. But apparently Free Radical are now on the chopping block as Embracer struggle to bring their finances together, which is something that's been reported for the last few months. Embracer apparently had a $2 billion deal that wasn't confirmed, and they had all these acquisitions, all these studio plans hinging on this one deal going through, that then fell apart, and then they had to fire Volition. They shut that incredible studio down, and now they're apparently looking to shut Free Radical down as well. It's just one of those things where I point to the industry being aflame, and it's just, how the hell did you get that far? How the hell were you able to plan all this stuff out on ostensibly monopoly money, invisible money? Don't worry, that money will load in later down the line. Just trust us, it'll all work. And then it doesn't, and people let go, and projects fall apart, etc. It's insane. The thing that I do want to end on is the fact that the highest selling games of the year are single player games. The highest selling game of the year is The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom. That's currently sold 18.5 million, according to Insider Gaming. And just underneath that, like I mentioned, is Hogwarts Legacy, another fundamentally single-player focused game. I guarantee the memories that you have of this year are rooted in single-player games. And it's one of those things where if you start looking at the wider picture of what is Game of the Year 2023, it's the Baldur's Gate 3s, it's potentially Dead Spaces, it's Resident Evil 4, it's Final Fantasy 16, single-player games, single-player stories, well-written characters, things that you actually care about. I don't know why it's this hard. Well, I do. I get it. They look at the likes of the Fortnites and the Warzones and the Apex Legends, and they want one of them. And I get that. There's a business reality to trying to make a one of them, but you can't make 12 of them at once and expect them to work, as Sony is finding out. I also want to just throw in here the GTA 6 announcement. We haven't got a trailer yet, but we did get a series of tweets from Sam Houser, one of the, founder of Rockstar, but one of the original members of why Rockstar's a big deal, tweeting out that they're going to be announcing GTA 6 at the start of next month. Now, I guarantee some of that excitement is, what the hell is GTA Online going to be in the future? But most of that excitement, the fact that it got 1 million likes in about 20 minutes, is the fact that it's what is the next single-player GTA installment going to be like. All of our memories for Grand Theft Auto are baked into the fact that it's a single-player game. Yes, GTA Online is massive, but like I said, I guarantee if you think about GTA and the history of GTA, you remember Nico, you remember Claude, you remember visiting Vice City, you remember the soundtracks, you remember the amount of care that was put into the single-player games and why that all landed. All of that goes away if you're only ever focusing on live service stuff and never really knowing what your core identity is or why people went to you in the first place. I have no idea how long this video's been going on for, but oh my god, I needed to say all of this. Super quick, I'll put a video on screen right here, right now that lets you know my thoughts on the history of Rockstar and what happened with Red Dead Redemption 2. Thank you very much for listening, and I'll catch you very soon. I've been Scott Tilford from WhatCulture.com.